Hey true crime fans, welcome to Buell School. Step into the small town of Fernley, Nevada. It's a typical Friday afternoon in May of 2013, and the sun is shining bright over the picturesque town. The birds chirp their melodies as the townsfolk go about their business. But within the walls of the Pape home, a grim and chilling fate awaits. Robert and Dorothy Pape, an elderly couple, were living out their golden years in Fernley. Robert tended to their yard while Dorothy enjoyed a peaceful midday nap in their shared bedroom. Little did they know, their tranquility was about to be shattered. Enter Jeremiah Bean, a 27-year-old fresh off of an expired parole for a burglary charge. He had been a juvenile delinquent in California and had served time in Nevada prisons for burglary. During his parole, he began associating himself with Fernley's wrong crowd, known for their partying and thievery. Bean had one thing on his mind: to rob the Papes' home. With ease, he made his way through the unlocked front door and into their living room. As he searched for valuables, he stumbled upon the master bedroom and found Dorothy sleeping soundly on the bed. But what started as a robbery quickly escalated into something far more sinister. Bean's eyes landed on a .22 revolver, glinting in the light. He took it in his hand, the weight of it reassuring. Then, Dorothy stirred in her sleep, and he raised the revolver, fired 5 times. Her lifeless body fell back against the bed. Her sweet dreams turned into a nightmare. But Bean wasn't finished yet. The sound of his own breath was deafening in his ears as he frantically searched for anything else of value. His eyes landed on a stash of necklaces, bracelets, and earrings. He pocketed them without a second thought, then noticed the keys to Robert's truck on the dresser. He knew it was his ticket out of there. Robert, who had been outside tending to the yard, heard the shots ring out. He rushed back inside, desperate to save his wife. But Bean was waiting, his finger on the trigger. Robert was shot, his life slipping away as he fell to the floor. His last thoughts were of his beloved Dorothy and the horror that had befallen them. As Jeremiah Bean fled from the scene of the crimes, the stolen truck roared down the road as he made his way towards Reno. He knew he had to act quickly and pawn off the stolen goods before anyone could catch him. He drove to a nearby pawn shop, which was always bustling with activity, and quickly appraised his loot. To his delight, the pawnbroker offered him a generous sum of $1,000 in cash for the items he had brought in. Jeremiah left the pawn shop with a smile on his face, feeling satisfied and thrilled that his plan had worked so well. With the fresh $1,000 burning a hole in his pocket, he met up with his Fernley friends, buying drinks for everyone and boasting about his successful loot. He felt invincible and powerful, like he could get away with anything. But as the sun began to set over Fernley, the Pape home was shrouded in darkness. The birds had gone quiet, the only sound the distant wail of police sirens. It would be days before the truth would come to light, before the residents of Fernley would learn of the chilling events that had transpired in their midst. The murder of Robert and Dorothy Pape, carried out by a man with no remorse, would forever change the town's history. And the name Jeremiah Bean would forever be etched into the annals of infamy. Jeremiah Bean's heart raced as he woke up the next morning, still riding high from the thrill of his successful weekend. He reveled in the feeling of power that came with the money he had secured from his heinous crimes. He felt invincible, unstoppable. He spent the rest of the weekend driving back and forth between Reno and Fernley on the I-80, a desolate stretch of road known as the Big Lonely. But as he returned to the Pape residence in Fernley, Jeremiah grew restless looking at the lifeless faces of Robert and Dorothy. The dead couple seemed to be mocking him, reminding him of the savage acts he had committed. With a cold, calculated demeanor, he dragged their bodies across the length of the house and piled them into a nearby closet, burying them in clothes. The ghastly scene didn't deter him from looting any item he deemed valuable, as he saw an opportunity for even more profit. After each visit to the Pape residence, he would return to Reno to sell more items for cash. With a twisted sense of pride, he even bragged about his Mother's Day weekend to his friends, who became enticed by the promise of a quick buck. They decided to raid the Pape residence as well. On Monday morning, Jeremiah had another truck full of stolen items to pawn off in Reno. But his greedy nature would be his undoing. As he was driving back to Reno, he realized that the stolen truck he was driving was low on gas. He stopped at the Mustang exit, where he saw a sign for a nearby gas station, but a wrong turn led to him being stranded on the side of the road. After several unsuccessful attempts to get the engine running, Jeremiah abandoned the vehicle and began walking along the deserted I-80, searching for a payphone to call for help. But he was soon met with unexpected assistance from Lieber Graham, a 52-year-old newspaper delivery man who pulled up beside him, willing to lend a helping hand. Jeremiah initially entertained small talk with Lieber, trying to gain his trust. But the cold-blooded killer knew that Lieber had seen too much. Jeremiah reached behind his back, fidgeting with the revolver he had hidden there. With a quick draw, he whipped out the weapon and aimed it at Lieber, pulling the trigger without a second thought. The newspaper delivery man was killed in an instant. Jeremiah knew he had to act quickly to cover his tracks. He forced open the door and dragged Eliasar's lifeless body onto the hot asphalt. He then tossed the body in front of the truck, jumping into the driver's seat and shifting the gear from park to drive. Jeremiah waited just long enough to feel both the front and back tires of the truck roll over Eliasar's body before parking the vehicle again, leaving the keys in the ignition and dragging Eliasar's body to the side of the road. With the stolen truck now abandoned, Jeremiah knew he needed to dispose of Eliasar's vehicle quickly before someone noticed it was missing. He sped off towards Fernley, abandoning his original plan to pawn off the stolen items in Reno. The cost of his actions was now more than just his soul. It was innocent lives. Lieber Graham had helped his last stranger, and it had cost him his life at the hands of Jeremiah Bean. Jeremiah Bean's mind raced as he drove Lieber Graham's stolen truck back to the Pape house in Fernley, Nevada. The stench of decay filled his nostrils as he approached the once peaceful home of Robert and Dorothy Pape. The house had been picked clean, but Jeremiah still had some of their belongings with him. His hand shook as he drove the truck into the garage, removing his belongings before setting the truck on fire. The flames quickly spread from the vehicle to the walls of the garage, consuming everything in their path. The heat was unbearable under the scorching Nevada sun, but Jeremiah couldn't bring himself to move. He watched as the fire grew larger and larger, knowing that he had to leave soon. As Jeremiah fled the scene of the crime, he sought refuge with his friend Patrick Brady on Tamsin Lane, just a few blocks away from the burning Pape residence. But as they talked, Jeremiah began to feel overwhelmed. He knew that his actions were bigger than he had intended them to be, and he couldn't keep it to himself any longer. The words spilled out of his mouth, recounting the gruesome details of the crimes he had committed over the weekend. Murdering Dorothy Pape, stealing her personal belongings, murdering her husband, pawning off their property, partying in Reno, murdering Lieber Graham on the I-80, and lighting the evidence on fire at the Pape house. As the two friends talked, they noticed their neighbors standing in the backyard of their house, watching the Pape house burn in the distance. In a panic, Jeremiah dashed out of Brady's house and let himself into the neighbor's home. Inside, he encountered Angie Duff and her boyfriend, Lieber. Angie immediately sensed that something was wrong and began to scream as she ran toward her bedroom. But Jeremiah had a gun, and he fired at Angie, hitting her before she could escape. Lester rushed to the back door, but Jeremiah fired shots in his direction, shattering the glass barrier between them. In a panic, Lester watched as Jeremiah stood over Angie, finishing her off, or so he thought. When Lester tried to take the gun from Jeremiah, the two men struggled until Jeremiah was able to watch Lester draw his last breath. Jeremiah started to empty his pockets of evidence as he heard the wail of approaching sirens. Before he had the chance, Angie, injured and weakened by the wound Bean had inflicted a few minutes earlier, summoned the courage and strength to rush into the kitchen with a knife, hoping to catch Bean off guard. Unfortunately, she wasn't fast enough. As she clumsily charged at the man who had taken the life of her love, he quickly disarmed her. This time he made sure that he finished the job. She perished in that very kitchen, her fate sealed as she lay on the floor, slowly fading, wondering if her and Lester would meet again on the other side. Blood stained Bean's shirt as he removed it, and he ran to the nearest neighbor's house and crouched down to slide through the half-open doggy door at the base of the front door. Once inside, he climbed into the crawl space above the hallway of this strange house, where he emptied his pockets of all remaining evidence, dropping the .22 revolver that had once belonged to Robert and Dorothy Pape, the $600 in cash he had made from selling stolen items, and the .38 he had used to kill Angie and Lester. As Jeremiah reached the living room on his way out of the house, he was confronted by the homeowner, whom he had not yet seen. But he was no longer armed. In a final move of cowardice, he ran past the homeowner and dove back outside through the doggy door. Jeremiah Bean had committed unspeakable acts of violence and terror, leaving a trail of destruction and heartbreak in his wake. Jeremiah Bean's heart was pounding as he raced through Angie and Lester's home, looking for a way out. He needed a car, and fast. His mind raced with thoughts of escape as he made his way to the kitchen, where he spotted the keys to Angie and Lester's cars sitting innocently on the counter. In a split-second decision, he grabbed both sets of keys and made a run for it. Jeremiah raced through the garage, hoping to slip under the door undetected, but his hopes were quickly dashed. As the garage door opened, he was met with the blinding light of multiple police cars, their sirens wailing through the normally peaceful Fernley neighborhood. Neighbors had heard the commotion and called for help, sealing Jeremiah's fate. He was trapped, with no way out. The police quickly apprehended him and confiscated the stolen car keys he had on him. It was the beginning of the end for the cold-blooded killer. His fingerprints were found on the truck he had abandoned on the I-80, and the discovery of Eliasar's body in the desert only added to the weight of his crimes. As the investigation continued, the bodies of Angie and Lester were discovered, their families left shattered by the senseless violence that had robbed them of their loved ones. Despite his attorney's efforts to argue that his client's addiction and rough upbringing had led him down this path, the jury found Jeremiah guilty on all counts of first-degree murder. In 2019, the court ruled that Jeremiah's death penalty sentence could move forward. Though it could not bring back his victims, the city of Fernley could finally find some peace in knowing that he would never be able to harm anyone again. Jeremiah Bean's actions had left a permanent mark on the small town, a reminder of the danger that lurks just beneath the surface.